DataFinz offers a powerful no-code API builder that enables users to create APIs from various data sources within seconds. It supports both OAuth 2.0 and basic authentication for secure access control, ensuring data protection. With serverless API deployment, users can seamlessly launch APIs without managing infrastructure. The platform also includes built-in rate limiting, allowing administrators to restrict the number of reads per user within a specified time frame. Additionally, DataFinz automates the generation of Swagger documentation, simplifying API management and integration for developers and users. DataFinz is built on three simple components that streamline data integration and API management. Connections enable integration with various data sources, including databases, files, and external APIs, ensuring smooth data flow. API Designer endpoints provide a no-code interface for creating and customizing APIs, allowing users to define endpoints, transformations, and security settings effortlessly. From various data sources, API Publisher has the ability to build APIs on top of tables, views, custom SQL, and stored procedures. DataFinz enables seamless no-code data retrieval by exposing tables as APIs supporting the GET method. This allows users to efficiently fetch records through API requests, ensuring quick, secure, and structured data access, all without writing a single line of code. In this demo, we'll walk through querying a table using GET with DataFinz. To begin, the user navigates to the API Publisher, selects the Designer option, chooses the relevant API name, object connection, and object name, and then creates a new endpoint, assigning it a meaningful name. After that, they select GET from the available API options. Next, the user chooses the required columns, and DataFinz suggests camel case field names for better readability. Filters can also be applied as needed. Once the endpoint is created, it's ready for validation. The next step is to add the endpoint to the API documentation and set up authentication for secure API access. The user navigates to the API Publisher, selects the documentation option, and provides the application name, authentication type, module name, and optional IP address before selecting the appropriate endpoint. Finally, the user can view API details in Swagger by clicking Authorize, entering credentials, and logging in. Upon execution, the user gains direct access to the table data, demonstrating just how simple and powerful DataFinz no-code API integration can be. DataFinz enables users to execute stored procedures as APIs using the POST method, allowing data operation with a no-code approach. This simplifies complex database operations by exposing stored procedures as API endpoints. In this demo, we'll walk through executing a stored procedure via API to update data using DataFinz. We have an example stored procedure that transfers an amount from one account to another. The user begins by navigating to the API Publisher, selecting the Designer option, API name, and choosing the relevant object connection and object type. Next, the user can create a new endpoint, give it a meaningful name, and select POST as the API method from the available options. The user then selects the required field names, filters, and the required input parameters to create an endpoint. Once the setup is complete, the endpoint is added to API documentation and authentication is configured for secure access. Finally, the API is validated and executed in Swagger. The stored procedure is then tested in Postman, where authorization is provided by specifying the source and destination account IDs for the transfer. Once executed, the user can confirm the successful transfer of the specified amount. DataFinz allows users to seamlessly expose Excel files as APIs using the GET method, providing no-code access and simplifying data retrieval. This eliminates complex configurations, enabling API-based access to Excel content with ease. In this demo, we'll walk through how DataFinz connects to cloud storage, selects an Excel file, and instantly exposes it as a REST API. The user begins by navigating to the API Publisher, selecting the Designer option, and choosing the API name to edit. They then enter the relevant object connection, type, and object name before creating a new endpoint with a meaningful name. Once done, they select GET from the available API options. Next, the user selects the required columns in the Fields section, while DataFinz automatically suggests camel case field names for better readability. Filters can also be applied as needed. Finally, the user can choose the necessary API parameters. Once the endpoint is created, it's ready for validation. The API is then tested in Postman, where upon execution, the user can instantly retrieve data from the Excel file. DataFinz simplifies data ingestion by allowing users to process and store JSON and XML data through a single endpoint. With its no-code approach, it effortlessly handles semi-structured data, transforming it into database tables without complex configurations. In this demo, we'll explore how DataFinz streamlines data integration and parsing through a single API. The user begins by navigating to API Publisher, selecting the designer option, and choosing the API name, appropriate object connection, and object type. Here, the endpoint is automatically created, eliminating manual configuration. Next, the endpoint is added to API documentation, and authentication is set up to ensure secure data access. Several parameters can be configured in this process. By reviewing the example values, users can identify locations where API data can be parsed or specify a connection name from DataFinz. Additionally, users can leverage other functionalities, such as adding new fields or setting up alerts for enhanced data management. Let's explore how to dynamically create a table in SQL Server while parsing JSON in Postman. Here, we have a sample JSON data containing nested arrays. When the user executes the request in Postman, a corresponding JSON table is automatically created in SQL Server. Similarly, by simply changing the file format and executing the request, an XML table is created. The newly created tables can then be viewed directly in SQL Server. DataFinz empowers users to combine multiple data sources into a single, unified API, simplifying data integration across different platforms. With its no-code approach, DataFinz combines various databases, file storage, and data lake for efficient querying and analysis. In this demo, we'll see how DataFinz integrates products data from PostgreSQL, orders data from Snowflake, and customer data from a Parquet file in Azure Data Lake Storage, all within a single API. The user begins by navigating to the API Publisher, selecting Designer option in the DataFinz interface, and configuring the API by specifying the name, object connection, and object type. In the next step, the user creates an endpoint by selecting Get from the available API options. Multiple sources can be added by clicking Add Source and configuring the object connections. Users can then specify objects, delimiters, aliases, and joins using a simple drop-down selection. The user can format the connection by clicking Share under each source and modify the object, field, condition, and connection as needed. Finally, the necessary field names, filters, and API parameters are defined to create the endpoint. Once created, the endpoint is added to API documentation, and authentication is set up for secure access. The API is then tested in Postman, where a single request retrieves combined data from all three sources. The user can now query products, orders, and customer details all through a single API with DataFinz.